Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today is day 2 of my Halloween week of videos. Today I'm going to talk about the film Who Can Kill a Child from 1976, or as it's also known, Island of the Damned. Now, this film is a Spanish film. It's in both Spanish and English. It's mostly in English, but it is a Spanish film. It's directed by Noersko Ilbian Serrador, I think, a young English couple who have decided to go on one last trip while the wife in the relationship, Evie, is pregnant with their third child, and they want to go on one last trip before she is born. And they go to the southern Spanish coast because they're going to go to a sparsely inhabited island of Almazora. After going to the Spanish coast and spending a night there, they go to Almazora and they take a boat there. It's 4 hours by boat. They get there and they find that the island is filled with manic, crazy children, and no adults have been found, because they find out later that the adults have been killed by the children overnight, and suddenly they woke up wanting to destroy all the adults, and they have to find their way off the island before they become victim to the children as the other adults did. Obviously, this film draws a lot of parallels to Village of the Damned. Even one of the many titles it has, is called Island of the Damned, so I can understand that. Also because you have this whole idea of a demonic child. One of the things I really like about this film is Village of the Damned was very explained. You eventually figure out exactly what happened to these kids, how these kids happened, what was the deal with the aliens. I think that's a bad idea in horror. I think it's far scarier when you don't know exactly what's going on. And I think a horror movie stays with you when you leave and you still don't know exactly what was wrong with the villain, the thing that scared you throughout the film. That's something I really like about Who Can Kill a Child versus Village of the Damned. Because Village of the Damned, it's explained, but Who Can Kill a Child, I don't know exactly, and that's scary. Not knowing something is incredibly terrifying, especially when it's something that's affecting your life so much. It's very, very scary. You're not exactly sure what's going on for a while. It plays a lot in ambiance for a long period of the film. You don't really know what's going on with these kids. It's just very random and strange and bizarre. And I think that's very, very scary, because as soon as you're given a reason from one of these horror villains, it suddenly gets less scary. To me, I always think it's less interesting. Once you understand the mystery, it's like it's not as much fun, and this film maintains that fun. It also has a lot of interesting moral questions about itself. The idea that if a child was threatening to kill you and you had a choice to make, could you kill a child? And that's why they wiped out so many people, is because no one could fight against them. It's hard to kill a child. You're told as an adult that's a very terrible thing to do, to harm a child. Morally, what is your responsibility and what is the moral thing to do? Even if it is a child who's considered defenseless and weaker, but what if you're stuck in that situation? When you can raise these kind of ethical questions and at the same time being a very entertaining horror film, which I think Who Can Kill a Child does very well. If these kids are killing everyone, I mean, naturally that's not something that comes up every day, but it does kind of made me think about that. The question of film is, who can kill a child? It's very hard to kill a child. I'm not going to tell you if one is killed or not, but I think that would be a hard thing to do, and that morally brings up a lot. It's definitely both a thought-provoking film and entertaining film. It freaked me out a little bit, not too much. This film was released with at least 4 different titles, 2 in the UK and 2 in the US, and maybe in other parts of the world it had even more titles, but it was called Would You Kill a Child? Death is Child's Play, which is considerably close to the book this film is based on, The Children's Game, or that's how it's translated from El Juego de los Niños. Again, I'm not good at Spanish. And then in America, it was released as Trapped and Island of the Damned. Now only one of those titles stuck. It's interesting it has so many titles, but it seems to be on the internet only referred to as Island of the Damned, and mostly and pretty much Who Can Kill a Child. A lot of the time you don't see the kids' faces. Most of the time you do. And certain kids' faces become recognizable, but there are certain scenes where you have a lot of kids and it seems like you're only really seeing their heads, like they don't have personalities because they're somehow like they've been taken over by some force. It made it a little scarier that they felt a little anonymous in some places and then not anonymous. The film would kind of go back and forth a little bit. An interesting way to do it, because most of the time you do that at the beginning and then slowly you reveal more, I guess is the tradition that we're all used to. Let's not do that. Let's mix it up. And I think that made it interesting because sometimes you'd forget about them as characters. They almost felt like an evil force, but then it would come back and remind you, like, not only were these kids, but they did have personalities despite being taken over. There's a lot of homages to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, supposedly. I didn't really see them as much in the film, but I kept reading that, so I guess that's true. Apparently the lead of Tom, the director wanted Anthony Hopkins. Instead he got Louis Flander, and Evie was played by Prunella Ransom. Louis Flander, who plays Tom, he's an interesting lead for a horror movie because he's not the most likable. He keeps things from his wife, which is to protect her, but I don't think he's the kind of protagonist you can entirely side with. There's some protagonists in horror movies where I think, you know, you're like, oh, that's like a normal person, it's a normal guy. And he seems a little off, you know, which I kind of like about it. It makes you kind of think of him morally in a different way than I think you would if he was just all good, you know. I think that would be a little too black and white. This director makes it a little more gray, which I like. He's kind of a sissy, but he's kind of not. He's a very well-rounded character. I don't know if Evie is as well-rounded as he is, unfortunately. I focused on both of them, but I felt like it was a little more in his favor. I've read in a couple places Stephen King wrote Children of the Corn, and the short story came out a year after this, so I guess this is supposedly where that came from. I don't know, you know, people have similar ideas. I don't know how big this movie was when it came out, so I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, mostly because I don't have enough research to really counter that. I think this is the best kind of crazed kid movie I can think of and that I've ever seen. I like Village of the Damned. I've never loved Village of the Damned. I've never loved like the bad seed. Usually it just feels a little overdramatic when you try to do these demonic children movies. I've never seen someone do it in such a visually scary way. And also I think because those films are trying to talk about a little too much and explain too much and try to give you kind of an understanding. Whereas Who Can Kill a Child is a little more surreal, it's a little more odd. That beginning part where it tries to talk about all the various war atrocities and how many children were killed is a little out there. I don't know if you necessarily need that or not. Supposedly it's been cut out of certain releases. It does kind of make you on the side of kids before the kids become, because they talk about the kids and about children and how children are the victims of various things in other places early in the first act. So it's an interesting way to make you think about how it's really terrible that children are put in this way and then make them the villain of the movie. It really makes you kind of have an emotional arc as a viewer because it's really kind of playing with your expectations and what you think of the kids who are going to be villains. It makes you like kids and it makes you fearful of kids in the same, you know, almost 2 hour period. I feel like the film really takes you through an arc as a viewer because you're going from really thinking about children and how they're the victim of all these kind of adult ideas of war and war crimes and war and like how many children are affected by these things that they have no control over, to a point where you see them kind of lashing out. And part of it, the film kind of insinuates that maybe it's because like it's an evolutionary idea because adults have hurt children in such a way. It never gives you a strict answer, and I like that a filmmaker can be that daring, you know, especially with a horror movie. I feel like too many horror movies need to explain things, and I don't want an explanation. I want, you know, this film will forever make me think about it because I don't have an explanation in my mind. It took me as a viewer on kind of a ride in my head and thinking about the perception of children. I was surprised and taken aback at how good of a horror film this really is and how smart of a horror film it is. This is one of the few horror films I think that took me on a ride as much as it took the protagonist on a ride, and that's a really fun thing to watch. So if you have seen Who Can Kill a Child or Island of the Damned and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And tomorrow is day 3 of my Halloween week of videos. That will be tomorrow, 24 hours from when this video drops, and I hope to see you then. And thanks for watching.